بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. Last week we spoke about the preparations made by Shaykh Izzuddin al-Qassam. He made preparations in Palestine to prepare for a revolution against the British occupiers. And he made these preparations in secrecy. And he had a very well-organized plan. And he commanded his soldiers not to take any action until he gives the command. And the British who are occupying Palestine did not have any idea of what Izzuddin al-Qassam had organized and prepared. So Izzuddin al-Qassam, his plan was to catch the British off guard and to start this revolution. And he would have the element of surprise on his side. So one of the soldiers from one of the contingent in Izzuddin al-Qassam's army, he jumped the gun. Rather than waiting for the order of the commander to start the revolution, he saw an opportunity to attack a Jewish soldier, and he went ahead and did that. There was a British officer along with a Jewish officer. They were patrolling an area. One of the soldiers of Izzuddin al-Qassam saw this, and he saw this is an opportunity, I can ambush these guys. And he did that. So by doing that, the British became aware that there is an organized army that is waiting to attack us. Because this one soldier made this mistake and he took action without receiving the order from his commander, the whole plan became known to the British. They realized that Izzuddin al-Qassam had prepared an organized army. And then the forces of Izzuddin al-Qassam lost the element of surprise because of that one mistake by one soldier. So the British, they suppressed this revolution before it could even begin. They suppressed the revolution before it really even had a chance to get off the ground. This revolution was crushed by the British, and Izzuddin al-Qassam himself, he was killed. Rahmatullahi alayhi. So we spoke about this last week, how the mistake of one person not following the command of his leader and taking action without first receiving the order to take that action, we spoke about the terrible consequences that this type of an action can have. And this is an example of that. So this revolution that Izzuddin al-Qassam had spent years organizing in secrecy, he spent years organizing this, detailing all of the technicalities, preparing for everything. He spent years in this, and then because of one soldier who acted without getting the command to act, it destroyed, it ruined all of these preparations that took years to make. Subhanallah. Right? It just shows the importance of making sure you follow your commander and you obey the instructions of your leader. So sadly, this revolution, it was crushed before it could even get off the ground. But then, after some time, the jihad was reignited under the leadership of the great Shaykh Fahad al-Sa'di, rahmatullahi alayh. Fahad al-Sa'di was a colleague of Izzuddin al-Qassam. So after Izzuddin al-Qassam was killed, Shaykh Fahad al-Sa'di, he took the reins, he took over. And the good thing is that the soldiers of Izzuddin al-Qassam, even though Izzuddin al-Qassam had been killed, his soldiers, or most of his soldiers, were still organized. He spent years organizing them, so that organization was still there. So these forces left behind by Izzuddin al-Qassam, even after his death, they were known as the Qassam forces. The Qassam forces, because he is the one who organized them. So the Qassam forces under their new leader, Shaykh Fahad al-Sa'di, they initiated the great revolution of Palestine. the Great Palestinian Revolution in 1936. So this was an official revolution that started in 1936, and it spread throughout Palestine with demonstrations and military strikes taking place, and it was officially announced as jihad fi sabilillah. And the official announcement of jihad was actually on May 15th, 1936. So the Great Palestinian Revolution began, and the people were called to participate in jihad in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to liberate Palestine from the British and from the Jewish presence. So the Palestinian leadership announced that they will fight and they would not stop the revolution until the revolution achieves its goals and objectives. And what were the goals and objectives of that revolution? To liberate Palestine. That Palestine has to return to Arab rule. And the British have to leave. And the Jews, okay, those who are here, they can stay, but they will not have power. So this is what the Palestinians demanded. So the Qassam forces, they destroyed military roads. They destroyed transportation routes of the British. They demolished bridges. They attacked Jewish centers. They attacked British centers. They cut electricity lines. They severed telephone and telegraph wires. Right? These were all military operations as part of this great Palestinian revolution. The Qassam forces, they were doing 50 operations a day on an average. Right? 50 strikes or 50 operations on a day in this armed revolution. Now at the same time, there was another jihad leader. His name was Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Husayni. He organized his own group of soldiers, and he was managing his military operations with his group from his base in the city of Bir Zayt. Right? So two Palestinian factions, both fighting for the same cause. So they cooperated with each other, the Qassam forces and the forces of Abdul Qadir al-Husayni. They cooperated with one another in fighting against the British and the Zionist presence in Palestine. So they targeted Jewish and British targets. They struck English military camps, and they attacked the British transportation centers. So of course, the British, they were very worried about this. That this is not just, a few people revolting. This is an organized revolution. And it's on a very large scale. So the British got worried, and as a response to this, they launched these massive search campaigns. And they started carrying out armed attacks on all of the revolutionary movements they could find. And they began demolishing buildings. They began demolishing homes in any place where they thought these revolution movements were operating. If there was any base that they thought that the Palestinians are using this place as a base for their military operations, the British, they would come and they would destroy that building and they would destroy those homes. Now, of course, the British were doing this, but they were supported by the Jews, right? Because the Jews and the British, they were working together. So the British were supported by the Haganah. We spoke about the Haganah last year. That was basically the Jewish military that had gained a presence in Palestine. So a number of these Jewish settlers who came into Palestine, the British, they armed them and they trained them. So the Jews, they had their own military branch that was known as the Haganah. And then from within the Haganah, one extremist group branched off from them, and that group was known as the Irgun, right? So that was a paramilitary branch that was even more extreme, right? So soldiers from both the Haganah and the Irgun, they were supporting the British, and they were fighting against the Arab revolutionaries. Now, in terms of the Islamic world outside of Palestine, volunteers from all over the Muslim lands began to mobilize and come into Palestine to support this revolution. There were volunteer soldiers who came in from Iraq, who came in from Jordan, who came in from Syria. The Lebanese commander Fawzi al-Qawuqji, he was a very well-known Lebanese commander. He was able to lead 150 armed men into Palestine to participate in the revolution. So the situation continued to intensify. By the month of August in 1936, by this time, the Palestinian revolutionaries had carried out about 1,000 attacks, right? The call for jihad was in May of 1936, and by August of that same year, by August of 1936, so within a period of about only 3 months, the Palestinian revolutionaries were able to carry out around 1,000 attacks against the British occupiers and against the Zionist occupiers. So the British, they feared that this situation was slipping out of their hands. They feared that they were losing control. So the British, they used all of the means at their disposal and all of the brutality that they were known for to suppress the revolution. But still, even with all of this, they could not stop the revolution. The revolution continued. So they were not able to squash it. They were not able to crush this revolution no matter how hard they tried. So what did the British resort to after this? The British resorted to speaking with the Arab kings and the Arab rulers. So at the request of the British, some of the Arab kings and rulers sent a message to the leadership of the Palestinian revolution, to Shaykh Al-Hajj Amin Al-Husseini, and also the Arab Higher Committee that ruled Palestine. Some of the Arab kings and the Arab princes, they sent a message to the Palestinian leaders, and they said in this message, and this was at the request of the British asked them to do this. So some of these Arab kings and leaders, they said to the Palestinian leadership, "We have suffered greatly from the situation in Palestine, and we," meaning the Arab rulers, "we, in agreement with our Arab kings and Prince Abdullah, who is the Emir of Jordan," he was the Prince of Jordan at that time, "we, in agreement with our Arab kings and Prince Abdullah, the Emir of Jordan, we invite you to settle into tranquility, end this revolution, come into peace, and spare the bloodshed, stop the bloodshed, and trust the good intentions of our friend, the British government, and its declared desire to achieve justice in Palestine." The British government, they are our trustworthy friend. Right? They really want peace in Palestine, and they want justice for everyone in Palestine. So we should trust the British. This is what the Arab kings and rulers sent to the Palestinian leadership. Right? And the British, they betrayed the Arabs so many times up to this point. We can't even count the number of betrayals that the Arabs faced by the British. But still, these Arab kings and princes, they're telling the Palestinians, trust our friend, the British, right? They want justice in Palestine. So stop the bloodshed, end the revolt. So this call of these Arab kings, it came to the Palestinians in the month of October of 1936. And the Arab Higher Committee, that was the leadership committee of Palestine, when they received this message from these Arab kings, they responded just 2 days later. They responded. And subhanAllah, this Arab Higher Committee, the Palestinian leadership, they really didn't have much knowledge of politics. They were not politicians, right? They didn't have political experience, and they didn't think that their own brothers, the Arab kings and princes, they didn't think they would betray them. Okay, maybe the British would betray them, but our own Arab brothers, nah, they would not betray us. If they're saying that we should stop the revolution and the British are going to find a peaceful, just solution to this, then we trust our Arab brothers, right? So it was some naivety on the part of the Palestinian leadership. They trusted this message that came from the Arab kings and the Arab princes. So because of having these good expectations, these good thoughts of the Arab leaders, just 2 days after receiving this message from these Arab kings, the Palestinian leaders, they backtracked what they had previously announced. Previously, when they declared jihad, they had announced that we will not stop the revolution until the revolution achieves its goal. And the goal is to liberate Palestine and kick the British out. They said they would not stop the revolution until that goal is achieved. But now, after receiving this message from the Arab kings and the Arab leadership, they backtracked and they said, okay, we will pause the revolution and see where this goes. So they agreed to pause the revolutions. So the forces of Sheikh Abdul Qadir al-Husseini, they stopped the revolution from their end, and they requested the Qassam forces to also pause the revolution from their end as well. And they said, look, we have received assurances from the Arab rulers that the British will investigate this matter and they will reconsider our demands. And of course, the British will not continue to brutalize us after the severe blow that they have been dealt by us. You know, in these few months that we have been fighting them, they have suffered a lot of casualties. So they will not dare to continue to hurt us, you know, after they know what we are able to do, right? So the Al-Qassam forces, initially they were kind of wary of this. They didn't want to stop the revolt, but the forces of Abdul Qadir al-Husseini, they stopped. So the Al-Qassam forces did not want there to be disunity between the two factions of the Palestinian fighters. So they said, okay, if you have stopped, then we will put a pause to our end of the revolution as well. So they agreed to a temporary truce until they could see the results of what the British were trying to do. In the following month, the month of November of 1936, a British Royal Commission came, and this commission was named the Peel Commission. So this commission, they came in to investigate the causes of the revolution that occurred in Palestine. Like, what were the root causes of this revolution? So it's a royal commission that came in from England to investigate the root cause of the revolution. And during this period of truce, basically a ceasefire period, during this period, this commission continued to meet with the different leaders. They met with military leaders, with Jewish leaders, with Arab leaders, with different politicians during this pause in the revolution. So they investigated for a period of about 8 months, you know, interviewing people, talking to people, and their stated goal was to find the reason for the revolution. What were the root causes? Why did this revolt take place? And what are some of the solutions that we can find that would be fair to all parties involved? So after investigating for 8 months, in the month of July of 1937, the Royal Commission, this Peel Commission, issued its recommendation. What should be done? What's the solution? So what was their solution? What did they recommend? They recommended to partition Palestine, to break Palestine into 2 states. One Jewish state and the other an Arab state. And the Arab state should be merged with Jordan. It should become part of Jordan. And there should be one separate state only for the Jews. So again, the Palestinians, they felt betrayed. What? The Palestinians felt betrayed. How is this a solution? The Palestinian expectations were that the British would leave and the Palestinians would retake control of their own land. Their land would not be split up, right? They were expecting that a parliament consisting of Palestinians would be established in Palestine, with some Jews as part of that parliament as well, right? Because Jews were living there in Palestine now. So they were even accepting, they said, okay, a few Jews can be part of the parliament as well, so that they can ensure that the Jews have their rights. But Palestine would remain for the Palestinians and for the Muslims. It would not be a Jewish state. It would not be a Jewish state. This is what the Palestinians were expecting the solution would be. But instead, they were betrayed by the British once again. And this Peel Commission, they said the solution is to split Palestine into 2 states. One state for the Palestinians, which will be merged with Jordan, and the other state will be for the Jews. So again, this was a great betrayal. So on July 23rd of 1937, after the Palestinians attempted to persuade the British to reverse this decision, this partition, it will not work. we don't agree to break Palestine into two states. So they urged the British to reverse this decision, but the British would not hear of it. They didn't want to hear anything that the Palestinians had to say. So on July 23rd, 1937, the Arab High Committee, they announced its rejection of the British plan to partition Palestine, and the Arab Higher Committee continued its demand for the establishment of a unified Arab-Palestinian state in Palestine that is ruled by the Palestinians. And the Arabs, they guaranteed, they said, look, if we take Palestine and the British leave, and Palestine comes back under Palestinian rule, the Arabs were willing to guarantee that the Jews would have their rights. The Jews who are living in Palestine, they will have their religious rights in Palestine, and they could even have some representation in the parliament. The Arabs were willing to agree to this. But Palestinian will remain for the Muslims. But the British did not pay any attention to what the Palestinians had to say. The revolution had calmed down. That's what they wanted. The revolution had calmed down and it had lost its momentum. So the British got what they wanted. That's all the British wanted. The British saw that the momentum of the revolution was getting really strong. And if the revolution was allowed to continue, then perhaps the British would lose. So the British wanted to stop that at any cost. So all of this was just a game by the British. All of this was just a game. And the British were known to play these games. They were the experts at playing these type of games. So they got what they wanted. The revolution was paused, and the momentum of that revolution was lost. After this, the Arabs, they called for a conference that was held in Buludan in Syria in the month of September of 1937. This conference, which was known as the General Arab Conference in Buludan in Syria, it was attended by 450 Arab delegates who announced that all Arabs, the whole Arab world, must reject the idea of Palestine being partitioned into two states. That is unacceptable. And we must demand the end of the British mandate. The British, they have to leave Palestine. And we must demand the end of Jewish immigration into Palestine. And we must demand the end of transferring any lands of Palestine to the Jews. Right? These were the demands that the Arabs made in this conference. But of course, the British, they gave no weight to the Palestinian or the Arab demands. They didn't care. Right? So when the Qassam forces saw that this matter was nothing more than another British deception, they realized this is just another trick by the British. They did it again. Right? The Qassam forces, when they realized this, they resumed the jihad. They resumed the great Palestinian revolt after a pause of about 1 year. It had been paused for about 1 year, right? And of course, if it was paused for 1 year, they lost their momentum that they had established, right? So they don't have as much of an upper hand now as they had at that time. But the Qassam forces, they resumed jihad after this pause of about 1 year. On September 26th, 1937, the Qassam forces assassinated the British governor of Al-Jalil. And this British governor of Al-Jalil, he was basically ruling the whole northern area. So the Qassam forces actually targeted him and they assassinated him. Then Abdul Qadir al-Husseini, who was the military commander of the other contingent, he remobilized his battalions as well. So he led an army attack on British army bases in Jerusalem and on the roads between Jerusalem and the coast. At the same time, the Qassam forces and also Abdul Qadir al-Husseini, both of these forces, they both redeclared jihad in the way of Allah, jihad fi sabilillah throughout Palestine. So jihad started, official jihad started in Palestine once again. They saw that this so-called peaceful solution that the British were promising, they saw that this was just another deception, and the British had deceived the Arabs once again. And the British actually tricked the Palestinians into quelling the revolution. And through this, the British regained the upper hand and they retook control of the situation. the situation, control of the situation had been slipping out of the hands of the British during the revolution. But then with this pause, the British, they were able to regain control of the situation once again. So the British were experts in these type of plays of deception, right? And the Arabs and the Palestinians, they didn't really have experience with this. So they were tricked by the British a number of times, and this is another example of that. But now, the Qassam forces and also the forces of Abdul Qadir al-Husseini, they realized what had happened. They realized that this was just a big deception on the part of the British, so they reignited the jihad in Palestine once again, and the great Palestinian revolution continued. And inshallah we'll speak more about that next week bi'idhnillah. Jazakumullah khaira wa barakallahu feekum. Wallahu a'lam. Sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. If you have a car downstairs, I'm closing the basement, please move it. If you have a car downstairs, I'm closing the basement, please move it. Jazakum Allah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.